Welcome to the December 7th, 2020 Troy City Council meeting. I will call this meeting to order and ask for the roll call, Ms. Dixon.
Mayor Baker,
Here.
Councilmember Abraham,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Brooks,
Here.
Councilmember Chamberlain Krenga,
Here.
Councilmember Erickson Galt,
Here.
Councilmember Hamilton,
Here.
Councilmember Hoderick.
Here.
All present this evening. First item on the agenda is certificates of recognition and special presentations, and there are none this evening. There are no carryover items, and there are no public hearings. So we will move on to public comment for items both on the agenda and not on the agenda. As a reminder, so long as we're meeting virtually, public comment can be submitted via email to publiccomment@troymi.gov or via voicemail to 248-524-3302. The same 3-minute rule applies. So I will turn it over to City Clerk Dixon for any public comment this evening.
Thank you, Mayor. We just have one voicemail tonight.
Hi, my name is Chris Mikulski. I'm a resident of Troy, and I just wanted to send out a quick note to everyone who helped put together that tree lighting ceremony yesterday. I wanted to thank you for that. My family and I really enjoyed it. I thought it went very well, and it was also pretty cool to also hear our mayor sing as well too. Mayor Baker, I think you did a fantastic job. Thank you for sharing your musical talent with the rest of the community. And, just wanted to wish everybody a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Thank you very much.
Well, that's it, huh? So thank you, Chris. That's very nice of you to say, and I appreciate the compliments to me for the singing, but I also want to add thanks to city staff who worked so hard to put together a virtual holiday Christmas tree lighting ceremony this year. I have to call out Cindy Stewart, our community affairs director, who did a lot of organizing work behind the scenes, and I called her the executive producer of last night's event to make sure everything ran smoothly. So thank you, Cindy, for all your hard work, and to our Department of Public Works and Dennis Trampen, who supervised the facilities and installing the Christmas lights and holiday lights, and to make sure everything was decorated and ready for Santa to pull the switch when that was time. We appreciate you very much. Mayor Pro Tem Brooks and her family were there socially distanced, as well as Councilmember Chamberlain Krenga and her son were there, and her husband as well. And then the rest of council, as I understand, was at home safely watching from the warmth and comfort of their own homes. And so I know everyone was participating in their own way. And I think it was a nice event that the city was able to do. And a tradition we were able to carry on under very different circumstances this year. But I do personally hope next year we can get back to more of our winter wonderland celebration, because I know that it's a lot of fun for residents, young and old alike. So again, thank you to all who made that happen. And thank you, Chris, for calling in and starting off the thanks for that. It's very nice of you. So anyone else have any comments on related to public comment tonight? Okay, and as a reminder, one more time, public comment, so long as we're meeting virtually, can be submitted via email to publiccomment@troymi.gov or via voicemail to 248-524-3302. Next on the agenda, there are no postponed items this evening, so we move on to regular business. I1 is board and committee appointments. There are no mayoral appointments this evening and no city council appointments either. So we move to I2, board and committee nominations. I do have some mayoral nominations this evening. I will start with adding 2 student representatives to the Global Troy Advisory Committee, 2 that have previously served and are eager to continue on in their senior year of high school, and I'm happy to do that. So I'd like to renominate Caitlin Howe for the student representative term ending July 31st, 2021, and Arjun Kapali, also for the term expiring July 31st, 2021.
Support.
Moved by the chair, supported by Councilmember Hamilton, that I nominate Caitlin Howe and Arjun Kapali to the student representatives of the Global Troy Advisory Committee for the terms expiring July 31st, 2021. Is there any discussion on that? All right, the vote, Ms. Dixon.
Mayor Baker,
Yes.
Councilmember Abraham,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Brooks,
Yes.
Councilmember Chamberlain Krenga,
Yes.
Councilmember Erickson Galt,
Yes.
Councilmember Hamilton,
Yes.
Councilmember Hoderick.
Yes.
Motion carries. Next up, I'd like to make some nominations to the Planning Commission. For the, all three are for terms expiring December 31st, 2023. First up, I'd like to renominate Carlton Faison for the term expiring December 31st, 2023. And I'd like to nominate Jerry Rauch and Lakshmi Malalahali to the Planning Commission for the terms expiring December 31st, 2023.
Support.
Moved by the chair, supported by Councilmember Hamilton, that I nominate to the Planning Commission Jerry Rauch, Lakshmi Malalahali, and Carlton Faison for the terms expiring December 31st, 2023. Any discussion? The vote, Ms. Dixon.
Councilmember Abraham,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Brooks,
Yes.
Councilmember Chamberlain Krenga,
Yes.
Councilmember Erickson Galt,
Yes.
Councilmember Hamilton,
Yes.
Councilmember Hoderick,
Yes.
Mayor Baker.
Yes. Motion carries. That's all the mayoral nominations I have this evening. Mayor Pro Tem Brooks, do you have any nominations this evening for City Council?
I do, Mayor. Thank you. I would like to, renominate Student Representative Alankar Shendi to the Traffic Committee. She previously served last year. This is for the term ending July 31st, 2021.
Support.
Moved by Mayor Pro Tem Brooks and supported by Councilmember Chamberlain Krianga that City Council nominates for the student representative. I actually missed the name. You cut out a little bit for me right when you said it. But,
Sorry. I believe it's Alankar Shendi.
Okay.
Sorry if my pronunciation is not.
That's okay. It's my speaker this time. For the term, it expires July 31st, 2021. Any discussion? All right, the vote, Ms. Dixon.
Mayor Pro Tem Brooks,
Yes.
Councilmember Chamberlain Krenga,
Yes.
Councilmember Erickson Galt,
Yes.
Councilmember Hamilton,
Yes.
Councilmember Hoderick,
Yes.
Mayor Baker,
Yes.
Councilmember Abraham.
Yes.
Motion carries. Any other nominations this evening, Mayor Pro Tem Brooks? Okay. That concludes City Council nominations this evening. So next up is I3. There is no request for a closed session this evening. So we'll move on to I4, Resident Engagement and Priority Study, which will be introduced by Assistant City Manager Bob Bruner. There he is.
Thank you, Mayor, City Council. It's good to be back to talk to you about the resident study again this week. Just to, for anybody who's tuning in, didn't see the discussion 2 weeks ago, we're embarking on a resident survey. And 2 weeks ago, we talked about different modules on the survey and different potential survey questions. And so this week we've provided a draft, and it's 6 pages. One of the goals that we talked about last week is to actually, keep it down to 6 pages so that it doesn't get too long that people don't want to fill it out. We have 21 benchmarking questions, which are the same among all the communities that take the survey. And so we'll be able to benchmark our results against others around the country. We have some open-ended questions. We have what's called the budget allocation module, a future projects and programs module, and then the communication preference module. So I'll leave it there and try to answer any questions you might have. And again, the goal here tonight is like I said last time, on a continuum. You could sit here and vote on each and every question, which I don't think we want to do that. Or you could say, hey, this is pretty good, go forth and conduct the survey, or anywhere in between. But we're going to get some feedback from City Council here tonight.
Okay. Thank you, Bob, especially for your continued hard work on this survey, and for the emphasis you're placing on getting good community engagement and involvement. So I know this is a big part of that process. So thank you. Any questions from council for Bob? I see Councilmember Hamilton raise his hand.
Thank you, Mayor.
So,
Of course. No, thank you, Bob, again for all. This is fantastic. I really like what I see. And my question was for the 21 benchmarking questions, do we know what other communities have taken the same format same format survey through Cobalt or through similar? It'd be nice to know if it's nearby communities, if it's around the country, that's good too. But it'd be nice to kind of compare and contrast and know what we'll expect there. Do you know that?
Well, yes and no. So I don't have Cobalt's client list specifically. We can certainly get that, but but Cobalt actually does their own random survey around the country, even to communities that aren't clients, to establish the benchmarks. So they have benchmark both nationally, regionally, and by state. So regardless of who's actually their clients, they have data from around the country as well.
Wow, that's really cool. That's really interesting. I didn't know that. Thank you.
I know Councilmember Erickson Gall had asked a question earlier about the reason the education or the Troy School District information was on there. I think that was a good question. I know it's part of the public record. I don't know, Ann, if you wanted to re-ask your question, or I'll go ahead and go to you or ask further.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. Actually, I thought, Mr. Bruner, you did a nice job of answering the question. And then you also, what you said tonight really struck me, that the point of the benchmarking is to compare us with other communities. So we need to ask the same questions. So now I get why we're asking about schools, so that we can compare with what other communities are, how they feel about their schools, which is great. And I have a feeling that Troy will score favorably as compared to communities nationwide and in the state of Michigan. So the one thing I think I saw an answer to is I would like to, if possible, and I get that we don't want to expand it greatly, is to have a way that when we're asking people if they're satisfied or dissatisfied with the city, especially in terms of if there's somebody who's dissatisfied, I think it would be helpful to us to get a sense of why, because it's just kind of a question. And, yeah, it's great to know if people are satisfied, dissatisfied, but if there's a trend, like if a lot of people are saying, my water bill's out of control, just to use a example that's come up a lot lately, it would be good to kind of get a sense of why people feel the way they do, either positively or negatively. And I don't, not married to that idea, but I think that might be something that might be that we might want to consider.
Yeah, I think there's a couple different ways we could address that. One, and the thing that I mentioned in the Q&A, I believe, is that if we had something, a subject where there was a high level of dissatisfaction, then we would include questions about that on a follow-up survey, which was another question that was asked: is, are we going to do more surveys in the future? And my answer is yes, I hope so, but it's up to the city council to appropriate the funds and approve those agreements. But assuming that we did, if we found out like, boy, we're really, behind the benchmarks in a particular area, then in a subsequent survey, we could ask more questions about that specifically. Another option, it would be to have an open-ended question, maybe after question 21, where the way it's laid out now, we have the 21 benchmarking questions, and then open-ended questions 22 and 23 are what do you like most about the city, what do you like least about the city. We could move those open-ended questions elsewhere and put an open-ended question there that says, if you are dissatisfied with something above, tell us why. So that would be one way. Another way to address it.
Great, thank you, Bob. Councilmember Chamberlain Craig.
Thank you, Mayor. Just quickly to that point on allowing our residents to be able to provide more detail, I would just encourage we make it optional, including in the boxes that we have. So if people don't want to add further, they don't feel burdened in doing that. I know that helps with likelihood of people to answer those questions. In terms of the survey, I have a question and then sort of a comment question. And I'll start with the first, which was around question 24, Parks and Recreation. And I noticed that green space is listed alongside parks as well as trails. So just wanted to get a sense of what you meant by green space. Is this undeveloped parks, unused green space, say around the community center, or kind of what you were thinking with that?
It's a good question. I don't really have a specific definition of each one in mind because it's not really important what I think each one means. It's kind of what the respondents mean, when they check that box. So those are things that we talk about often: green space, generally, city parks, generally, trails and pathways, specifically. So this is this particular question. It's kind of fishing, basically, to see if the respondents feel more strongly about one thing or another. And then this is another area where, depending on what the results were, we might ask more specific questions in the future. If, for example, people are highly satisfied with the parks, but not with green space, then, we might ask more focused questions about, what are people thinking when they're thinking about green space and that sort of thing. So it is potentially repetitive, but they're terms that we use frequently, so we included all of them on the draft.
Sure. Yes, that's completely fair. Just want to make sure residents aren't confused as they look at those different options, and if there's a way to maybe put in parentheses what is meant by that, so people aren't confused that they see parks and they see trails on there, but they also see green space as well. And I think my concern with that was we've heard from a lot of residents around private developers and more and more of forested kind of green space disappearing. And as we've talked about, we have somewhat limited control over some of those areas. So just don't want to get residents confused by what we mean by that. But welcome other input on that as well. The second thing was more of a comment, sort of a question at the end. And that was as I was reflecting on the ICMA report from last week, all about equity and inclusion. And my initial thought was, as I looked at this entire survey, was kind of how does diversity show up in this survey? And I recognize that a good part of it is a benchmarking survey. It is what Cobalt is doing in other communities, and some of that we can't change. But was also thinking about how is this an opportunity to sort of incorporate this as well in the portions that we do have some control over. And I know that there is a good question around policing, asking people how they feel that they're treated fairly. And I think that's a great question to kind of get at some of that. But also was wondering in terms of ease of accessibility, in terms of language, things that I don't really know the data on in terms of our community, but knowing we are a diverse community, could there be some opportunity to ask in terms of if there are any barriers around kind of accessibility with language, with city services or anything? Another idea was around newspapers. When we're asking about communication preference, could there be a question that asks in the different options of newspapers, print and digital, could there be a question, to what extent do people turn to different cultural or ethnic type news sources, such as, say, Arab American news? And if they were to say yes, there could be an opportunity optional to be able to say what that is. Just to get a sense if there are other kind of news sources that we could partner with, and what our residents are going to as a news source, recognizing that those are very diverse news sources out there. So just kind of a question and comment is, how might this show up in the work that we're doing?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I don't have an answer, but I've got a meeting scheduled with Cobalt tomorrow to talk about the feedback tonight. And so I think most of you remember William St. Amour from Cobalt. And so I can talk to him about that and explore that further.
Very good. Good comments, Rebecca. Thank you for those. And thanks for answering, Bob. Councilmember Abraham, I see your pen sticking up. It blended in with your book, so that was a tough one.
I'll try for more contrast next time, Mayor. All right. So Mr. Bruner, great job with the survey. I think this is a really fantastic first draft, so I can't imagine there's going to be too many changes to the final draft. I did have some questions about questions 25, 26, 27 specifically, and those were the questions where it was mark up to 7, what things you found important or what amenities you wanted or want to see enhancements on. And I noticed for 25 and 26, there's about 24 options. It's like 20 plus options. And then question 27, there's like maybe 14 or 15. When you're marking up to 7, and most people would have a tendency to mark more or up to 7 versus just 2 or 3. My question is for that particular question, would we really get statistically significant data if, you could mark up to half of them as things that you'd like to see enhancements for? Is that something where maybe mark up to 3 or mark up to 4?
It's a good question, and I'll ask Cobalt tomorrow about that.
Okay.
Because I don't. It's a good point, but I don't know.
Okay, thank you. And then one additional question. I know we're trying to keep this as brief as possible, and we're trying to stick to 6 pages or less. For the library survey, I believe we did online and actually mailed out surveys as well. Is that still the intent? Is to have multiple ways to conduct the survey?
Yeah, that's right. There will be a random sample of recent Troy voters who will get the survey in the mail. Their survey, when they receive it, they'll have an opportunity to fill it out online if they prefer. And then it will also be open to anyone who wants to complete the survey online. And we'll be able to separate out the sample results from the non-sample results like we did with the library survey.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Abraham. Good questions. Additional questions or comments? Councilmember Hoderick.
Thank you. This is, I'm really looking forward to seeing the results of this and learning. This is going to be just a wonderful step in our engagement. The library was already, so I really appreciate all the work that went into this. The question number 29, where you have the comment, I don't think this question is needed with questions 26 through 27. I think I agree with that. And I'm wondering if there is an opportunity to just ask an open-ended question that gives the opportunity for, are there any other thoughts you would like to share with us? Kind of a qualitative anecdotal feed. I think if I took the time as a resident to fill this all out and there wasn't a space for that, it might be frustrating because this might actually make people think of things that they'd like to share with us. So I don't know when you talk to them if there's some sort of open-ended that just gives them a chance to share what's top of mind with us that didn't get addressed in the other questions. It's just my only other thought.
Yeah, I like that idea as well. And to be clear, the note on question 29, I don't think this is needed. It was actually from William. at Cobalt. So that was his input.
I could also argue that maybe something is needed that could be needed. What if we didn't list something that they think we need in our community because we have a narrow view? I mean, probably not the case. It's a pretty exhaustive list, but I just had that thought. But an open-ended question, I think, that allows for that. People are going to, if they find open space, they're going to say what they want to anyway. So that, I think, maybe an even broader question like Councilmember Hoderick talked about would be a good idea. I can totally imagine going through all this and thinking of all things I want to say and then getting to the end and thinking, I don't have a place to say that. So good point. Additional questions? I have a couple. A couple specific about some questions and then a broader. I have to find it. Question 24. I think that's where it gets out of the benchmarking and moves into our more specific. I'm pretty certain we don't have an animal control service in our city. So is it wrong to ask how they feel about it? I mean, I'd be very interested if they said it was great, but I mean, is that, I know we had to get rid of it pretty much and have the county take over. I mean, I don't know if that's I guess to me, it seems kind of, well, I'll see what City Manager Miller has to say, but it seems odd to me. Mark?
Honorable Mayor and Council, I think the issue from a historical perspective, if you look at, we had a higher level of service with animal control, and I will give you an example how high the level of service was. If your pet passed away, the animal control officer would come to your house and take the pet to the county's crematorium. You know, we had a very high level of service. So now we've diverted that to the county, and the service is nowhere near the same level. So all I'm saying is that this may show that people aren't satisfied with what we have now, with the understanding that we're not providing it. Thank you.
Okay, I totally respect that answer. I just it caught me as something I thought about. On 20,
and I want to add that so the service is provided by the county, and the police chief specifically asked that we put that service on the list so we could understand satisfaction with it. And I think actually Clerk Dixon was the first person to raise it because the clerk's office hears a lot of dissatisfaction about a variety of things. So that was when staff specifically asked for it. And I forgot to mention this. I think, last time we talked, I hadn't had a lot of time to get input from staff, but staff did provide input on all these specific boxes that we're checking. And this was one that specifically came up.
Fair enough. Fine. I thought we had zero of it. So, I mean, because every time I've been told, well, I called the police department and they told me to call Oakland County. So that doesn't, I mean, I would expect low marks on that, even though the police department and the clerk's office, I'm sure, is very kind and helpful about that. But okay, that's fine. My question 28, is this question really asking, would you be willing to fund with improvements with an additional amount of funding? Meaning, to me, the question is very different. So I'm like, well, okay, of the taxes I pay, yeah, I'd pay $5 to $10 per month for that service. Or is it, would I be willing to pay $5 to $10 per month more? Because I think it's probably would you be willing to pay more than, how do you want, I mean, do you know what I mean? And to me, the question doesn't read that way. Maybe I'm, again, not reading it right, but I had that thought as I was reading through it. I don't know if there's if that was a question that we kind of formulated or if that came from Cobalt and we've accepted it.
No, that's a Cobalt question, and so they use these two things in tandem of so 26 and 27. Those are all programs and services. The potential future programs and services. We've divvied it up into two different questions because we had a lot of things to potentially include, and so we try to organize it into two different questions so the one question wouldn't be too big. And so 26, 27, and 28 together are the future programs and services module. So the wording of question 28, as I look at it now, I understand your concern, and so I will talk to William about that tomorrow as well to make sure that's as clear as it should be.
Okay. Well, I just think there's a difference in, yeah, I'd pay $5 to $10 per month for dog parks, but oh, you mean $5 to $10 more a month? Well, I don't know. It's totally different. Like if someone tried to come back and say, well, hey, you said you'd pay $5 to $10 a month for it. We're just asking you to pay that much more. I can see misuse of the data in that, or confusion of the community. So if you can ask them, that'd be great. My other questions are more broad general. Can you remind us again of the timing once the survey goes out, how long it's open, when the results start to come back, what kind of intro letter goes with this to introduce this survey to the community? Meaning, like, what do they see if it comes in the mail? And then, those are my two broad questions at this point.
Yeah, so we'd have it open and available for 4 weeks for respondents to answer. Cobalt does the initial mailing of the sample, and then if people have not responded within 10 days, they'll do a second reminder. But overall, the goal is to have it open and available for 4 weeks, so that from there, obviously when that 4 weeks begins depends on when we finalize the survey. But even if City Council said, "Hey, this is great tonight, go forth," we wouldn't mail anything until January. Sending this out during the holidays is less than optimal. But just supposing for a moment that it was published in January, people had those 4 weeks to respond, then we could see results as early as February. And so I think it talked a little bit about this 2 weeks ago, that we might have some data to look at as part of the budget process, but not really have fully interpreted it yet. But definitely it looks like we're on track for first quarter calendar year 2021.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. And the intro letter aspect of it, or how it gets presented?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I can try to see if I have a copy of the library letter handy. I know it exists, but I don't remember exactly what it looks like.
I can't remember from the library. I think that's why I asked. Because I think, we're talking about Councilmember Chamberlain-Cranego talking about the diversity aspect of it. I mean, what that letter says as an introduction, I think, goes a long way to who's going to actually respond and the comfort level that someone would feel to respond. So obviously, they're the experts and know what they're doing. But I don't know if the Cobalt drafts that or if we do that in-house. Not we, meaning you.
Yeah, I've just found it and I'm opening it up. So I will distribute this after the meeting, so you can see what we did during the library survey. But it's pretty brief. It says, please help improve the quality of life of the city of Troy. Short study. It'll take you a few minutes. Please complete it before, in this case, it was July 13th. You can do it online. It'll be strictly confidential. Mentions that, we're working with Cobalt to actually conduct it. And if you have any questions, contact the city manager's office. So I can, like I said, share a copy of that with the city council. And if anybody has any questions or feedback on that, be happy to look at that as well.
I'm not sure that I will. I just was looking for a reminder. So I appreciate that. I think my question is, as I was talking to city manager Miller earlier, and I don't know if Bob, you were going to ask this question as well, but Does council feel like they need to see a final draft before we are done, or what's the procedure from here? We haven't given you a lot to make changes necessarily, but I don't know from your timing, Bob, if you need, I mean, we meet next week, but we don't meet again until January. I don't know what you need from us, and what council's level of comfort is as far as signing off or saying, we're ready, we trust you, or if we would ultimately like to see one more draft before it actually goes to print. So I will, I guess, start with Bob's needs maybe on that, if you have an answer to that, and then I'll look for council for any comments if necessary.
Yeah, it may be possible to provide an update a week from tonight. Our agenda deadline internally is Wednesday, so that we can distribute the agenda to you on Thursday afternoon. Like I said, I'm meeting with Cobalt tomorrow, and given that I'm not hearing a ton of changes, I might be able to get a updated draft to you in that time. And then the next city council meeting after that is January 11. So I'd rather not wait until January 11 to talk about it again.
I'm fine.
So I guess
with
it
that.
doesn't really cost us anything to come back and talk about it next Monday.
Well, and maybe, I don't know if it needs to be an agenda item, or maybe it's just in a report or something. So it's there. We have the opportunity to put our eyes on it. I don't expect a presentation unless there's some major thing that comes from it. I don't know what the rest of council feels about that. Certainly, I don't think we want to hold anything up. And so that's not the goal. And I don't know, anyone else on council have a thought, or are we satisfied with what we just heard? Sounds like if you can get something to us in the next agenda just to see a final glance, that'd be great. Thank you. Any other comments or questions about I4? Okay. Well, again, Bob, thank you for all your hard work so far on this. And I know Cobalt's probably your best friend so far this year, because you've been doing a lot of stuff with it. So we appreciate it and look forward to getting this out in the community. And I said it last time, but I'm really excited to see the benchmarking results by themselves, and then to have the opportunity to see some of our more specific questions that we've been talking about for a couple of years now. It feels like it's great to see this finally come into fruition. So thank you.
Thank you.
That concludes regular business this evening. We next move on to the consent agenda. Does anybody have a consent item they'd like to pull this evening? I see nobody. I see Councilmember Abraham's hand go up first.
I'd like to move all items on the consent agenda as printed.
Support.
Moved by Councilmember Abraham, supported by Councilmember Erickson Galt, that we approve all items on the consent agenda as printed in the agenda. Any discussion this evening? The vote, Ms. Dixon.
Councilmember Chamberlain Krenga,
Yes.
Councilmember Erickson Galt,
Yes.
Councilmember Hamilton,
Yes.
Councilmember Hoderick,
Yes.
Mayor Baker,
Yes.
Councilmember Abraham,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Brooks.
Yes.
Motion carries. All items on the consent agenda have been approved. Thank you. There are no memorandums and future council agenda items this evening. We've handled public comment and response. There are no council referrals, so we'll move on to reports. Does anybody have any comments on any of the reports this evening? Councilmember Hamilton.
I just was looking at O2A, which is the interim financial report for the first quarter of the 3 months that ended September 30th, 2020. I'd encourage residents that are interested into the state of our city's budget to take a look at this, to kind of get a sense of where revenue has been at given COVID-19, given the recession. It was very informative. I was very intrigued, and I might need to get our CFO on here. I think he is on here, Mr. Melzik, but it looked like Act 51 revenue, which is our gas and vehicle registration revenue that comes to us through the state, was down about 5 to 7% versus last year at the same time. And so I think if you project that for the whole year, that's, I don't know, $500,000 of the total of somewhere around 9 million in funding. I didn't see state shared revenue. It was kind of blocked all together as grants, and some of that was COVID-19 CARES Act funding. How does the state shared revenue look? And for those that don't know, that we receive that from the state, and it's typically sales tax money that the state receives and distributes to municipalities according to the state constitution and other legislation and whatnot. So how is that looking compared to the last year? You get a sense of what kind of shortfall there is, if there is any. I was pleasantly surprised by the Act 51. I thought we'd see more than 5 to 7% loss. So that's something we could definitely handle given our rainy day fund. So what are your thoughts on that, Mr. CFO? And
just City Manager Miller, I'm assuming you'd like CFO to speak. All right, very good. Go ahead, Rob.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Good. Yeah, we have not gotten any updates since August, but I don't know if you recall, but earlier in the conversation from this year is that because of all the CARES Act dollars, that so far our state shared revenue is just a little bit below what we originally budgeted. So we're in pretty good shape there. But what hasn't been since August, since the state's come out and given us any new guidance, is that the lockdowns have lasted a little bit longer. So we might see a little bit of slippage there. I just don't have the numbers yet.
okay, no, that's fine. I'm assuming are we going to get the CAFR, the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report for the last year at the next meeting? Typically it's December.
Yes.
Is that still
correct?
Okay, great.
December 14th, we should get a CAFR. And then just one other comment was that we're going to be making in January, we're going to be meeting with, City Manager Miller and Assistant City Manager Bruner, and we're going to go through and give you guys a better forecast for the whole year in January. So what we're going to do is in the month of November, we received our CARES Act dollars from the county. And so what we're going to do is we're going to come up with some budget amendments. It's going to be about $4 million in total. That is going to be revenue coming in that we didn't budget for. So that's going to be a budget amendment. And then from that point on, we're also going to try to forecast for you things like the aquatic center, the community center, and that's going to be a little more difficult, but we're going to do the best we can for you.
Yeah, I would just thank you for that. And my only additional comment is I'd like to know what the CARES Act dollars, what they're earmarked to. I'm sure there's some restrictions on that. And then how did our expenses raise to handle COVID-19? And do we actually make out a little better because of those dollars, or did they all just go to COVID specific things and thus it didn't really help anything else, extra in the city? That I'm kind of curious on that, just to get an overall sense of everything.
It's going to be a mixed bag on that. So if you think about it, like the hazard pay, that's going to be a break even, right? Because we didn't budget for that, but it's a new expense and we're getting revenues to offset that. On the other hand, the state gave us about $1.6 million to offset public safety. So outside of the additional overtime from public safety because of COVID, that's going to be a net gain for our organization.
Great. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Mr. Malzek. Appreciate that. Councilmember Hamilton, any other comments on that? You muted, so you must be done. While we're talking about financials, there was a late submittal of O2B, which was the general fund balance compared to the annual expenditures. We talked a little bit about it at our budget priority meeting last week. I had some questions, and then there's this late submittal today of the chart. I hate to put you on the spot, but is there a 30-second elevator pitch that city management would like to give on that, just to kind of tee it up for any residents who are just checking it out? I think it's an interesting analysis, and it looks like there's some added lines on some of those charts that are gave me a little bit of palpitations at first, but not figured it out. So I saw City Manager or Assistant City Manager Bruner come on and unmute. Looks like Bob, you want to take that one?
Yeah, at the end of the last meeting, there was some discussion about the city's forecasts and where we're headed. And so there was one chart in particular that we talked about. And so I wanted to provide more information about that chart, where the data came from. There was discussion about, the actuals versus the forecasts and that sort of thing. And there were, what it boils down to is what is the city's unassigned general fund balance going to be? And is it going to be within the policy guidelines? So this was an explanation to show, where the historical data came from, and also show how the forecasts are developed. And I added a couple in there. The question came up during the meeting, what is the city's fund balance policy? And it's currently 20 to 30%. But it was interesting in researching this that back in 2007, the fund balance policy was 15 to 17%. So the recession really changed the way we look at that. So I've got the history of the forecast of the fund balance policy on a chart along with those policy guidelines, just to see where we're at and where we could potentially be. So I guess, and at the end, rather than having a forecast of just one line, I kind of took a couple scenarios. There's several different scenarios actually, and included a chart with a kind of a range of options where you see one is the most conservative and one is the least conservative. And, so it kind of gives council a better idea of, what the range of where we may be headed, rather than a specific number, which we know for sure is wrong. That's one of my favorite things to say about the budget, is that it's a planning document. And the only thing we know for sure about it is that it's wrong. At the end of the year, we're going to end up a little bit over, or a little bit under, whatever. And that's why we have the presentation of the comprehensive annual financial report, is to figure out, what actually happened. So that was some of the thought behind that. And I never want to miss an opportunity to make a chart or graph that might help somebody, understand something. Because this financial stuff is difficult to grasp, even for people who've been doing it for a long time.
Well, thank you for doing that. And I will say, it's if you love graphs and charts, you're gonna love that late submittal. If you don't open it. It's not. It's gonna blow your mind, in not a good way. So no, but I do appreciate. I know I've asked some follow-up questions after our last meeting about that, and I'm glad to see. I'll continue to look at this. I just think it's important that we. It's tough when we're talking about the unassigned general fund balance, because people say, well, you've got that money and it's there for a reason. We're saving it for certain times, and we've got these forecasts that show that savings going down and down and down. And even that last chart, as you just talked about, Bob, with the best, of the kind of the conservative and the not as conservative estimates, or I'm not sure how the best, but that they both look pretty bad as far as they're both going down. So, it's just something for us to keep in mind as we consider to talk about budget priorities, especially. And I think it'll be another tool we'll use as we see the survey results and look at some long-term planning for the city. And I think, again, it's also important for you to keep those charts going out there and those numbers. Even though our budget's always available online, it can be overwhelming to somebody to click on that link and see, well, wait a minute, what page of how many hundreds of pages am I looking for? Except for Councilmember Hamilton, who I know he does that on a regular basis just for fun. But it's important for transparency. It's important for our citizens and residents and businesses even to know where we stand as a city and what the tools we're using to make these decisions moving forward, I think. So that was a long way of saying thank you, Bob. And check it out, everyone at home online, if you're interested in some of that stuff. And again, we'll be talking about it again in the future. So any other questions or comments about any of the reports this evening? Councilmember Chamberlain Craga.
Thank you, Mayor. Just wanted to call attention to O01D, the DDA draft minutes, just to say it was great to learn about some of the projects and things that the DDA is thinking about, and look forward to talking more with them to learn more about those different projects. I also had a question. I believe this is for City Manager Miller and or City Attorney Bloom. The minutes speak about recommending that the DDA TIF development plan not be updated until the Zen apartments are finished and occupied, because a residential council will need to be created. And just wanted to ask for more clarification about what is a residential council? Is it a subcommittee of the DDA? How is it established? And how might it impact the DDA TIF development plan and updating it?
Lori looks like she's ready to unmute. So there, City Attorney Bloom, please.
Yes, so the statute has a requirement for a residential council. So that's in the statute if there are at least 100 residential persons residing in there. So that is something that is required by state statute. And the reason that we recommended that we do that in connection is that that we think the timing, first of all, is going to coincide. We think it's going to be very, very close. But also there is some notification periods of time. So, and there are some publication periods of time, and there are, you have to notify all of the taxing jurisdictions. So again, just to have it all in one, if the timing does coincide, it seemed to make sense. So that's why we recommended that. As far as what it's going to look like or who's going to be on that council, that's something that, again, it is required and mandated by the state statute. So and we don't really have 100 residents yet. So that's something that will remain to be seen.
Thank you, City Attorney Bloom. That's the requirement. There has to be at least 100 residents in the DDA district. And as of right now, do we have any? We have 0 residents in the DDA right now.
We certainly do not have 100.
We've never had to worry about that. So, actually that's an exciting change to our DDA, as we have people moving in and actually living in that area. So that will change how that board functions a little bit. So that's exciting. Councilmember Chamberlain-Craig, did you have a follow-up to that, or did that work?
That's fine. Thank you so much. That was very helpful.
Very good. Any other comments or questions on the reports this evening? All right. 03A, always a nice note to election workers. We appreciate those, and we've sang your praises, City Clerk Dixon, and your team. But we'll do it one last time by calling out that nice letter of appreciation. So thank you again. Next up on the agenda is council comments. How about council comments this evening? Does anybody have any? I guess Councilmember Hoderick.
Yeah, I just wanted to take a second, and behind the scenes, helping us pull off these meetings, working with the city clerk's office has been an IT department that has just really been, I have no idea everything they've had to do, but I can imagine. And I think some of it was work they had done before anything like a pandemic had ever come in, where they were working on resources and making sure our city hall was always in really great shape from an IT standpoint. And I guess I just wanted to take a second and publicly, we've kind of touched on that when we talk about the budgets, and it's come up now and again. Just, shout out to the IT department. We really appreciate you and the extra hand-holding you've done with some of us, including one that isn't necessarily like in class and at work doing a lot of this Zoom and go-to kind of stuff. You made it seamless, and it's really allowed us to keep getting our work done, and we appreciate it. So just want to take a moment to say that. Thank you, Gert and your team.
That's very, very nice of you to say, Councilmember Hoderick. And I actually have a quick follow-up to that, or piggyback on that. And it relates to our broadcast support when we're broadcasting all of these meetings through YouTube or through CNN or through our different options. And the virtual tree lighting last night, I was kind of astounded by the fact that so many people went into setting up all those cables and setting up all the feeds to make sure everything was broadcast live on Facebook Live, on YouTube, on the cable channel. And we were only live for 15 minutes, but I said to Bethany as we were leaving last night, and the broadcast people and the IT department are there taking everything apart that they had put together. You know, I got there an hour early and they had already been there setting everything up. So all the time they spent there out in the cold doing that work for 15 minutes of live television, it dawned on me, you know, well, it was interesting that you brought that up tonight, Councilmember Hoderick, because it was on my mind, and it is always important to appreciate them and across all levels. So thank you for mentioning that, Ellen, and thank you, IT. So additional council comments. Mayor Pro Tem Brooks.
I have a question for Attorney Bloom. Do we know if there has been any extension for the Open Meetings Act to continue meeting virtually beyond December 31st? Without the reason stipulated that they had said we needed to meet starting January 1st.
I'm sorry, Mary. There has been a Senate bill and also a House bill introduced, and we are hoping that it will be passed by one of the chambers, hopefully tomorrow, and then it can be passed on to the other one. So we do anticipate that this will go forward and that it will be extended throughout the month of March. So for any reason, we're very hopeful, and I know that the Michigan Municipal League is working very hard to get this done, and I believe that right now there's really no major opposition to it.
Thank you. A good question, Mayor Pro Tem Brooks. Additional council comments? No. I don't really have any either, which is, you know, rare for me, other than to say thank you to all of our healthcare heroes, of course, and first and frontline responders, and everybody who's working so hard to do their part to keep us healthy and safe. And I guess that there's no closed session this evening. So we're getting out early tonight, everybody. So this meeting will be adjourned. Thank you. Have a good evening.
Take care.
Bye.